Steve Hanke is a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University, where he co-directs the Institute for Applied Economics, Global Health, and the Study of Business Enterprise. He is also a distinguished senior scholar at the Mises Institute, a senior fellow at the Independent Institute, a senior advisor at Renmin University's International Monetary Research Institute, and a special counselor at the Center for Financial Stability. Professor Hanke is widely recognized for pioneering work in currency reform, particularly currency boards and dollarization. He has advised governments from Washington to Latin America, from Asia to Eastern Europe. Hanke has published several books, monograms, and policy papers. His latest book, Making Money Work, places commercial banks at the center of financial system. But Hanke's world is multidimensional and bigger than economics. He frequently contributes columns on geostrategic issues to major publications such as Fortune, Forbes, National Review, and the Wall Street Journal, and maintains an active voice in policy discourse. Almost 1 million people follow him on X, formerly Twitter. He has been judged by Europe's Focus magazine as the third most influential economist of our times. Moeed Pirzada, editor GVS, invites Professor Hanke to understand his consistent support for Imran Khan, Trump's attempts to jump-start US manufacturing through what is increasingly becoming a trade war, and the growing tensions between Washington and New Delhi. Will Narendra Modi, who is meeting China's Xi in SCO summit, surrender to Trump's bullying? All that is on the table.
Trump is very eager to find rare earth metals in Pakistan.
This is a little bit of a joke, but
Advised Narendra Modi to come down and let the agriculturists suffer.
this is just hypocrisy on steroids. He couldn't stand to even be in the same room with Madam Gandhi.
What is Modi's bigger problem?
Modi's kind of in a corner. By the way, that 2% happens to be very powerful in the United States. India has done much better from an economic point of view than Pakistan. Khan's concerns about the poverty, slow growth.
Democracy can also work in Pakistan.
Step one is to free Imran Khan. Pakistan is enormously corrupt. Military gets involved and they essentially form monopolistic operations. And so competition is taken out of the system.
Professor Steve Hanke, thank you so much for finding time for me.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Moeed. It's very good to be with you.
So let me jumpstart very quick. I have been watching you on X, where you are almost being followed by a million people, and I was pleasantly surprised, but for your continuing support of Imran Khan in all these years, and why he matters to you.
Well, Khan matters because we struck up a friendship, as it turns out, a personal friendship through a mutual friend, and also kind of a professional relationship, in the sense that Khan is one of those leaders that's fairly rare, because he actually can step back and reflect on something. And the reflection that was relevant for me is that he thought something was wrong with the model of the economic policy in Pakistan. Why is Pakistan dragging along at a very slow rate of growth and going from one crisis to another crisis? And by the way, that included his own administration. He was doing a self-evaluation and basically starting with a self-evaluation, but then basically threw everybody else into the picture and went back. Really, the establishment of Pakistan as an independent country. So the evidence is pretty clear. If you look, for example, at your neighbor and rival, India has done much better from an economic point of view than Pakistan. And the question is, well, why is there such a gap? And then, after a little introduction to Pakistan and Khan's concerns about the poverty, slow growth, uncompetitiveness of the Pakistan's economy. We then got into the currency reforms that I'd done and discussions about those, and always those start by fixing the currency. And one way to fix the currency is to install a currency board, and a currency board is a very simple structure. The currency board issues a local currency, so they'd issue the rupee. The rupee would be anchored or backed by an anchor currency. Let's say that, for example, the US dollar. The rupee would trade at a fixed exchange rate with the US dollar with no restrictions, and it would be credible because the rupee would be backed 100% with US dollar reserves. So if people didn't like their rupee, they could take it into the currency board and exchange it for US dollars at the fixed exchange rate, and they would know that they would receive US dollars because the rupee would be 100% backed.
Something like Dubai, something like UAE.
Well, something actually like Hong Kong.
Okay.
I mean, Hong Kong has a currency board. The UAE, where I was on the financial advisory committee for 6 years at the UAE, they have something a little bit like, but not really a currency board. The dirham has a fixed exchange rate with the US dollar, and it hasn't changed for a long time. Right. And they have high reserves, but it doesn't operate exactly like a currency board. The central bank in the UAE does engage in discretionary monetary policy. So they have a monetary policy and they have an exchange rate policy. The currency board only has an exchange rate policy. It has no monetary policy. And the key thing is that, and this is something that Khan picked up on right away, is that the currency board can't extend credit to the government. They can't finance a fiscal deficit, for example. Right. And so what it does, it puts the politicians in a monetary and fiscal straitjacket. And it would make the big problem in Pakistan has always been the rupee and confidence in the rupee.
Professor Hanke, building upon it, what do you think is the real strategic interest of United States in a country like Pakistan? Is this democracy? Is this containing China? Is this fighting terrorism? What is it?
Oh, it's the air bases are very close to Tehran. The next time that U.S. attacks Iran, the bases in Pakistan will definitely be used.
Why are you so sure of it? I mean, we've been hearing the same in June as well, but nothing like that happened.
Well, I'm making my own judgment. When you're dealing with something like this, you have to connect many dots. In other words, the Secretary of Defense of the United States didn't tell me this.
So are you?
This is a matter, Moeed, of, should we say, reading the tea leaves.
Right.
And as I read the tea leaves, why do you think the field marshal, or as he's anointed himself as field marshal, he actually is a general, but the field marshal, and you know who I'm talking about. There's only one.
Awesome money. Yeah.
But yeah, he's. Why do you think he's been in the United States 2 times in the last month?
So are you then suspecting another clash of war between United States and Iran, including Israel, after September or in the September? Are you fearing that?
Yes. It's not a certainty, but in my book, it would probably be over 80%, which is pretty high.
You have also been tweeting a lot. I've been seeing your comments on Iran's currency. What kind of a crisis is in Iran, and how can Iran get out of this crisis?
Well, the one thing Iran could do, and I've by the way, I'm the only one who actually measures the inflation rate in Iran and does so literally every day. I have a technique by which I can use what they call purchasing power parity, and I have a model for looking using purchasing power parity, that model, and I'm able to measure their inflation. And the inflation rate, it's a little over 60% per year now today in Iran.
But coming back to Professor Hanke's interesting assertion or assumption that Pakistan has a role to play, General Asim Munir has a role to play in the next confrontation with Iran. What kind of a role Pakistan will have to play?
Well, just allowing U.S. aircraft to take off from Pakistan. It's a short flight into Iran.
Okay. But they can come.
There might be other elements that they're talking about, but I'm talking about the big one.
The US Air Force can also operate from Israel. It can also operate from Qatar.
Oh, there are other alternatives, but Pakistan is obviously on the what I call the A list.
So let me come to a more difficult question. I have interacted a lot with the US officials. So many in the Department of State, in former CIA officials and CENTCOM believe this thing, that military, the Pakistani military is the only ultimate power broker or an institution that can deliver for their interests. And they think that the democracy is not workable in Muslim societies, and they have no option but to use military for the strategic interest from Iran, as you mentioned, Afghanistan, up to India. So do you think this model, this thinking can be changed at some point?
Well, it's been a model that's been around for a long time. Let's put it that way. And you have to realize that the United States is a big imperial power.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as Pakistan's concerned, the Pakistan military, a country like Pakistan's more or less a vassal state.
Mm.
So what's the interest that the U.S. the empire has in Pakistan? Well, one is I just gave you. If in fact there is another attack on Iran, it would be convenient to be taking planes off from airfields in Pakistan. That's one thing. The other thing, of course, you've got Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a military thing. It doesn't have anything to do with democracy or anything like that. It's a military thing. So that I think I've indicated two, shall we say,
Mm-hmm.
pressure points or interesting points where the U.S. has an interest, as viewed by the leadership in the United States. I'm not saying everybody has that interest, but certainly the Defense Department would certainly have that interest if they were contemplating another potential attack on Tehran.
Professor,
And the whole issue about, well, what about Afghanistan and the Taliban? We don't know what's behind everything, but I'm just giving you things that are, to my eye, pretty obvious.
So I want to.
I think, by the way, speaking of the sharp pivot that the U.S. has apparently taken, a pivot away from Delhi into Islamabad, I think that has something that's part of the story of the pivot.
You mean like Pakistan is being used to pressurize India into submission?
No, it's just it's something that the U.S. Defense Department sees as a strategic asset, shall we say.
I'll again come back to it. There's another thought I want to share with you, and I want to tap your brain on it. The Pakistani American community for the past 3 years has been working very with a lot of sincerity and effort with Congress, with Senate, to create the argument that democracy can also work in Pakistan. Given your experience of 50 plus years of Beltway politics as an academic, you have been advising the governments, you understand Washington's internal temperament. What can the Pakistani American community do to impress upon Washington deep state that democracy can also work in Pakistan?
Well, I think as if you've been following what I've been saying, step one is to free Imran Khan.
Yes.
That's one. You're asking concrete advice. That would be a very concrete thing, and then let's let a free election occur that's monitored and so forth, and let the cards fall where they may. My guess is Khan would win in a huge landslide, but that's just my take on it.
What other things are needed to convince upon CENTCOM, Department of State?
Well, that would be one step in the right direction. But then the question is, well, let's go through the scenario. Let's assume Khan was released. Let's assume there was a fair election. Let's assume he would win, and then the question is, well, would he be in a position to install a currency board, for example? I think he would, and I think the U.S. would back it, by the way. And if that was the case, you would cut down on a huge amount of corruption, because back to the capital flight, the money coming into Pakistan through this increasing mountain of debt that they're getting into, who takes the money out the back door? It's a political elite in the military. And where does it go? We know where it goes, by the way. I'm talking about the last calculation I told you I made, it was almost 40%. So for years, it's been between 40 and 50% capital flight, and it's in Dubai. And, as they say about Dubai, it's a sunny place where a lot of shady folks reside.
But from your comments on the currency board and your conversation with Imran Khan, I assume that Imran Khan was disheartened that despite his appeals to the Pakistani diasporas in North America and Europe, the money and the investment didn't flow into Pakistan. So he was wondering why, despite the fact that diasporas love him, why they didn't invest into Pakistan. And the currency board is the answer, because their investments are not secure. Because I have come across Pakistani physicians who have, say, 3 or 4 years ago, invested $1 million in Pakistan, which is not even worth $1 million now. I mean, forget about making any money on it. It's worth like $500,000 now, or even less than $500,000 now. So do you think the currency board is a solution to this kind of problem?
It's a first step, and what it means is that with regard to the currency is always the key in all these countries, and with the currency board, let's say the U.S. dollar was the anchor currency, and if that was the case, with a currency board, the rupee would just be a clone of the U.S. dollar. It would be as good as the U.S. dollar. So the expat community, there are a lot of successful Pakistani expats, which is interesting, because what do? They leave Pakistan. They're very successful entrepreneurs, business people, and so forth. They make a lot of money, but they're not putting the money back into Pakistan, and the main reason is the currency. But there also is another factor, and that gets into the governance aspect of things. The governance is bad. The military runs the show, and they're afraid. They're afraid. What if you make an investment in Pakistan and somehow you get crossways with the military, and the military doesn't, puts the thumbs down on you? You're basically going to be out of business.
True, and there are no courts. There are no legal
right, there'd be no administration of justice of any kind. I mean, you basically it would be out in the cold. Right. So So there are other things that go along with this, but the currency is important in the sense that stability might not be everything, but everything is nothing without stability.
Right.
If you don't have currency stability, you can't go on and reform other things and fix other things and clean out the stable, so to speak. And let's face it, Pakistan is enormously corrupt. That's another factor that gets into the picture and is something associated always with very slow growth.
So it's very interesting. First of all, I must admit that the point about the currency boards and the currency stability is brilliant. That's the pivotal point, because we keep on talking of the rule of law, the courts, the military, and everything, but the real thing is just that the investor's investment is not secure. I mean, he invests $100, he doesn't get back $100. Instead of getting $150, he's actually getting $50 back. So I think you have a very strong point. But Pakistani elites keep on saying that corruption is everywhere. They say China has corruption, India has corruption. When you say there's a lot of corruption in Pakistan, why the corruption is not hurting India or China?
It is. It is. But remember, there are levels that as you increase corruption, you crush the economy more and more and more. So the thing with Pakistan is that you have not only the military. I mean, the military is de facto running the country, and the military is very engaged, by the way, in business. Now that isn't so true in some of these other countries.
Agreed. It's not in India.
So and by the way, India, it's not a country of, shall we say, clean hands. There's plenty of corruption in India. These are relative things that happen. I'm just saying that and it's clear that this is another aspect of our conversations with Khan, and that is, okay, we put in a currency board. You put a straitjacket around the politicians. You stop the leakage of the capital.
But let me understand. You said military has a lot of investments in the business. The military thinks they're invested into real estate, defense housing authorities, in cereals and steel and whatever, and they think they are contributing to the economy. They think that, for instance, in construction, Frontier Works Organization, they think that their construction concerns are more efficient than the private construction companies. So why is military's involvement with the economy necessarily bad? Because you're a professor of economics.
Well, number one, all the studies that have been done on this interjection of military into the economy show the same thing. It slows down economic growth. Another country, a big example that's very similar to Pakistan, is Egypt. Egypt, the military is involved in making bread and all kinds of things, gasoline stations and so forth and so on. So what happens is that the military gets involved and they essentially form monopolistic operations. And so competition is taken out of the system. You don't have private 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 private entities competing with each other, right, to provide the what consumers want at the lowest cost. That's not the way it works. The military gets a monopoly, and they just run whatever the industry is into the ground, because they don't really have a competitive environment that they're operating in. They're setting the rules of the game. They are the monopolist. And we know from economics, you said, okay, Hanke, you're a professor of economics. Any economics textbook or empirical studies in the real world show that monopolies are very inefficient. Nationalized industries are very inefficient. If you have a nationalized steel mill, it will be much less efficient and productive than a privately owned steel mill.
Professor Hanke, you're into economics for the past 50 years. What about China? I mean, it's all state enterprise competing against each other.
Well, you have to look now. You have to be a little bit careful with China to characterize it that way. What is probably the greatest free market move in practical terms in the history of man has been Deng Xiaoping. His December 1979 speech, he opened up to privatize China.
Right.
So China has realized that the biggest free market set of reforms in the history of the world. It's China.
Right.
So yes, they have the government meddling with their fingers in all kinds of pies, but they have a great deal of new private enterprise that operates on a competitive basis. And by the way, that's why in many of these areas where you have critical materials, for example, where strategically China is way ahead of everybody else, those are in large part because you've got private enterprise.
So
I'm not saying it's pure private.
Why do we keep on saying that China is an authoritarian regime, everything is being controlled by the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, we say that because that's part of the Western propaganda. There is an element of it, okay?
Okay.
The Communist Party runs a show in broad terms, but to say they're running every little enterprise and every little shop and every little factory is a wild exaggeration. It's not the way it works. And what I call the three M's: mining, metallurgy, and material science. China is way ahead of everybody, and the reason for that is that yes, the government has put a lot of resources and a lot of money into research and development in the three M's: mining, metallurgy, and material science. And if you look at those areas at universities, and I'm speaking as somebody who watches this for a long time, because my first faculty position, I was a professor at the Colorado School of Mines, which is the #1 mining school in the world. So I've been watching this for over 60 years. And
there's a provocative question. Someone in the Pakistani military was saying to me, a very senior officer, that look, if we are running a military dictatorship and authoritarianism in Pakistan, so is China running an authoritarianism. So we can also make progress in Pakistan. What is the essential difference between an Egyptian military-run authoritarianism, Pakistani authoritarianism, Middle Eastern authoritarianism like Iraq or Saddam Hussein or Syria versus China? I mean, are they different from each other?
Yes, they're different in the sense that China has a great deal more economic freedom.
Okay.
So that's at 30,000 feet. That's the answer. Wherever you have, and I did a classic study that was published actually in the Cato Journal many years ago. I co-authored that with Steve Walders, and we looked at these indices of economic freedom. The Cato Institute has one. The Heritage Foundation has one. There are many of these things around, and you find a very tight relationship as economic freedom increases and liberalization increases, economic growth increases, and per capita income increases, and health increases.
Okay, so next to China is India. You recently tweeted, I think in the last 24 hours, you tweeted on 50% tariffs on India. You wrote, Trump is a masterclass in how to create foreign enemies. There was a Modi photo in the tweet as well. But don't you think that Trump is actually only playing momentarily to extract concessions in the agriculture market? He wants to have access in India's agriculture market, auto market, dairy market, and all of this is actually going to fizzle away in the next several days to weeks.
Well, now let's talk about, for one thing, in India, people have to understand 44% of the labor force in India is engaged in agriculture, and the tariffs the ag tariffs average 39% in India. They're very high. And the non-tariff barriers, especially in dairy, are very high too. Now that's domestic politics. If I would suggest Modi's kind of in a corner, because if he starts stepping on the toes of the agricultural sector in India, he's going to have political problems, because it's not like the United States. The United States, the most productive agricultural sector in the world is the United States. You know how much of the workforce in the United
4%.
States? 2.
2%.
2. So you have a huge difference.
So
And by the way, that 2% happens to be very powerful in the United States, because every state in the union has 2 U.S. senators. And so the state I come from, my home state, is Iowa. Great, that's the state where the tall corn grows.
Mhm.
It's right in the middle of the breadbasket of the United States. We have 2 U.S. senators from there. Ohio has 2. Indiana has 2. Illinois has 2. South Dakota.
You have a point. You have a point. It's a powerful agricultural lobby. He has a political problem, but which is a bigger political problem? I mean, he finding. I mean, is the tension and the fight with Trump a bigger problem, or the agriculture lobby inside India is a bigger problem? What is Modi's bigger problem, Trump or the agriculture?
Agriculture.
So are you then suggesting that Modi is not going to surrender to Donald Trump's demands?
Well, I haven't talked to Modi or his foreign minister, so I don't know.
You like his foreign minister. I saw that you appreciate J.S. Jaishankar. You think he's one of the 3 most best foreign ministers in the world.
So yeah, he is, by the way. So it's interesting now. Let's talk about this, Trump and the tariffs. The 25% tariff that was put on India, in addition to the original 25, so the thing that moved it up to 50, were secondary sanctions. The additional add-on of 25%, those were secondary sanctions, penalizing India because they were buying too much oil they were buying oil, period,
from
at
Russia.
a discount from Russia. Now, and now the European Union has just imposed secondary sanctions. Now, the European Union, it still buys 20% of its energy, actually 18% from Russia. So the European Union is scolding India and the US is scolding India for buying crude oil from Russia, when in fact, the European Union is getting 18% of its energy, its gas, from Russia. So this is just hypocrisy on steroids.
So, okay, this is hypocrisy on steroids. But what is the strategic goal here? The goal is submission of India to US demands. The goal is to punish Russia. What are the goals here?
Well, the alleged goal is to punish Russia. But as Ronald Reagan's former economic advisor and a free market economist, I'm against all sanctions. I'm against all tariffs, all quotas, all non-tariff barriers, all interference with trade. And the reason for that, let's say that Moab, you're selling something to Hanke, and that means what? We have a transaction, and let's just assume you're, for the time being, let's drop you into Pakistan. So you're producing something in Pakistan, you're selling it to me. You benefit from that, or you wouldn't have sold it to me at the price and on the terms we've agreed to. I, the buyer, am benefiting, or I would have bought it from you. And now, what does a tariff do? A tariff interferes with those gains of trade. It extracts some of them and puts them into the U.S. Treasury if it's a U.S. tariff. That's not good. And eventually it will slow trade because there'll be some people exchanging between each other in which the gains from trade aren't as great as the tariff. So that trade stops completely.
I saw your comments on it, and I've seen most of the, apart from Peter Navarro, who you know very well, the economist, apart from people like Peter Navarro, almost everyone is condemning Trump. But Trump team has a logic. They think that by putting tariffs and duties, they can jumpstart the stagnant American manufacturing base. As an economist, don't you agree with that?
No,
Why?
it's I don't agree with it because there's all the studies have shown that this that doesn't work.
Okay.
I mean, just in addition to being a free market economist, I'm a realist, and I like to look at the data and let the data talk. And the data show that this just doesn't work. And to the extent that you're saving any manufacturing jobs, the cost of saving them is enormous. It would be cheaper to for example, and let's go through a hypothetical. It would be cheaper to let an enterprise go bankrupt and pay off all the workers forever with huge pensions than it is to set up barriers to trade and tariffs and so forth that actually would keep that inefficient enterprise in business. You're protecting it, supposedly. So you're, in a way, you're protecting those jobs, but to do so, the cost is tremendous.
So
it's way greater than the wages received by those protected people. And by the way, that one thing in India, one reason the agricultural sector is so inefficient in India, and one reason that 44% of the labor force in India is employed in agriculture is because it's protected.
Right.
So in India, you have to understand the history of the thing. If you go back to independence, who was in charge? Well, you had a bunch of Brahmins. The Brahmins were in charge. The Brahmins were all educated in London. They were all socialist. They injected a lot of socialist language, by the way, in the Indian Constitution. Now, since about the mid 1990s, some of those policies have been kind of reversed, and things have been liberalized. So why is India now the fastest growing economy in the world? It's because of more liberalization. It's a little bit like what Deng did in 1979 in China.
Right.
Why did China boom? Because the chains were taken off of private enterprise. It was legal to have a private enterprise. Private property was legal in China. And to some extent, you have the same kind of scenario and picture working its way out in India. India has become much more liberal and, shall we say, free market.
With this perspective, will you then advise Narendra Modi to come down and let the agriculturalists suffer and accept Trump's terms and conditions? And
I've suggested that Modi ignore the tariffs, because I think the tariffs will eventually go the way of the dodo bird. They don't work, and it will be shown through time that they're not working, and I think we will eventually get back on the course that we've been on for decades, and that's lowering tariffs. I mean, the effective tariff rate, by the way, in the United States was only about 2%. Now the average effective tariff with these Trump tariffs is up a little over 18%, which is very close to the level that the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, the infamous Smoot-Hawley tariffs in the 1930s, that drove a stake in the heart of the U.S. economy in the Great Depression. That was one of the big factors in the Great Depression was the tariffs, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. which were up over 19%.
I was just thinking that have you ever spoken with the Indian decision makers and stakeholders as to what do they think about all this?
Well, I haven't spoken to any about it. When you say all this, I assume you mean the Trump tariffs and what in contemporarily going on right now. And the answer to that,
also the interaction between Russia, China, and United States.
Yeah, no, I haven't spoken to anyone currently about that. However, in the past, Mukesh Ambani and I were colleagues because we were both board members of the Kuwait National Bank together and served together on that. So I do know him, and Reliant is of course the main. His company is the main purchaser of Russian oil.
100%.
And my conclusion about that is that Mukesh has obviously a good head on his shoulders. He's fast on his feet, and he will land squarely on his feet.
And what does it mean?
So I'm not worried about the big refinery being somehow cut off from Russian crude.
You think the Ambanis are not going to come under the Trump pressure? They're going to continue what they're doing?
As I say, he is fast on his feet, and he will land on his feet. Exactly how and how many somersaults he has to turn before he lands on his feet, I don't know. But you have really a first-rate individual, and certainly was a first-rate colleague when we were on the board at the National Bank of Kuwait together.
Professor Hanke, I was traveling coast to coast on a car for 20 days, from Washington to LA. I stopped everywhere and I passed through the Republican MAGA heartland. I spoke to several people. They think that the world has cheated United States. The common Trump supporter thinks the world has been cheating United States, has been benefiting. China, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, everybody has been benefiting at the expense of the Americans. And once the tariffs are there, then American industry will come back. Chinese and Indian things will become expensive. Many things will be manufactured in the US. You don't think this is going to happen, like television screens and iPads and...
No, I agree with your observation, and that is a lot of people think that foreigners have, as Trump likes to say, screwed Americans.
Right.
They through all kinds of nefarious activities, like manipulating exchange rates, quotas, tariffs, non-tariff, all these things, and that the enemy is the foreigner. No, the creator of the trade deficit. And that's why Trump identifies the foreigner as being the enemy, because of the trade deficit. And he thinks the trade deficit is created by these foreigners, and the trade deficit is bad. No, that's not correct. The trade deficit is created by Americans, because Americans spend more than they produce. And the only way that gap can be filled is by importing more than we export, running a trade deficit. And we've done that every year since 1974, and we've been able to finance it very easily.
With?
And it's
not printing dollars.
It's not been a problem.
By printing dollars. These imports have been financed by printing dollars.
Well, it's been not by printing dollars. That's not how it's financed. It's financed by importing capital, and everyone wants to invest in the United States and U.S. dollar denominated assets. They don't want to invest in Pakistan with rupee denominated assets. They want to invest in the good old USA. So the capital comes in, and we either sell bonds or we sell equities to foreigners, and they give us money, and we give them a piece of paper, a bond certificate. We don't even give them a piece of paper anymore. Everything is done digital. It's digitized. So they get an interest in American assets.
So if I play a devil's advocate, the Chinese argument is that they produce solid manufactured real goods. Americans are only paying them in dollars or in bonds. So they are actually producing substantive things. They're producing iPads, laptops, iPhones, tires, chemicals, everything. And Americans are printing dollars because of the geostrategic control.
Well, that's not really what they're not really printing dollars. I mean, dollars are exchanged, but they're not running the printing press to import this capital. The capital wants to come in and buy dollars. Everyone wants to buy dollars. If you go to Pakistan, I'm sure you'd have no problem finding dollars all over the place.
Despite all restrictions, yeah, true. Everyone has dollars.
Everyone's got greenbacks. About 70% of all the greenbacks that are actually printed, you say printing greenbacks, printing dollars, about 70% of those are actually held by foreigners offshore in Pakistan, Argentina.
So what do you think?
UAE,
Okay, so this actually brings us to Putin's attempts since 2022 to challenge dollar through the BRICS, and in recent weeks there have been rumors of even pictures. I've seen pictures and samples of the BRICS currency. Do you think the dollar is under threat because of China, Russia, India?
Well, it is. I wouldn't want to put it in the threat. Number one, let's talk about BRICS and get rid of that in a hurry. It's a talk shop. They do a lot of talk, but they have no plan for a currency that we know about anyway. They talk about it.
They printed the samples. The samples were shown to Putin.
Oh yeah, that's easy to do. You can go down to a print shop and have somebody print up a Moab dollar, and give it to your friends for their birthdays. So that's for show. That's like the talk shop thing. They talk, they show, but in a concrete way. They haven't done anything, and they haven't even produced a plan to do anything.
Why? It's difficult. They don't want to do it. I know India would not.
Well, the big problem with BRICS, it is so far really a talk shop. For example, they talk about they want to establish a commodity market, BRICS, but they can't even agree on the city in which it would be located or the country it would be located, and there's no concrete plan. If you ask, well, what's the plan? What's the modus operandi for governance? What are the rules going to be? They don't have any. But they talk about it. They threaten to have it. No,
but why they cannot come together?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. If they could do it, I suppose they would do it. They keep saying they want to do it, but so far they haven't been able to deliver. However, I do think that the Trump tariff war will more and more solidify the South and the BRICS. And the sanctions that the U.S. has put on countries in which they've weaponized the U.S. dollar and the U.S. dollar financial system, like SWIFT, that makes the dollar more vulnerable. And people talk about it, and they try to figure out ways to find a substitute, find a challenger to the U.S. dollar. The big problem is it's hard to challenge the king. And there's always been a king. For 2,500 years, there's always been a currency that's dominated.
For 2,500?
And there have only been 14.
Seriously?
2,500 years, there's always one dominant currency in the world.
Are you starting from Roman dinar?
Yes. You go back, we're going before the birth of Christ.
Roman dinar.
Yeah, yes, I have the list of all 14.
So what
And
replaced the Roman dinar? The British pound, or there was something in between?
oh, I off the top of my head, I can't remember the average life of these currencies of 14. It's about 300 years.
So the dollar was created around 1773, right? If I
Well, no. Well, the dollar became king by replacing the British pound sterling, and that was starting around this First World War, but it really was after in the interwar years. The U.S. dollar became dominant, and pound sterling went by the wayside, and that was really completed after World War II. It started at big time in World War One in the interwar period, and by the Second World War, Britain was essentially bankrupt, and the colonies, of course, were
But but but
dismantled.
but Professor Hanke, I mean, are you starting the dollar's journey from 1773 when it was first published, created, or from the Second World War, First World War?
It own. I'm talking about the dollar as a dominant international currency. That occurred during the interwar period between the First World War and the Second.
So let's say put 1930, after the Great Depression.
Yeah, it's dominated.
So it's not even 100
It's a
years.
reserve currency. It's a currency used in all commodities are priced in dollars.
So from your calculation, the dollar has at least 100, another 100 years to go.
Well, I didn't say that. I just said the average is,
300 years.
around 300 years. So the point in that, Moab, is that it takes a lot for a challenger to knock the king off the throne. That's my point. So all this talk about the dollar is going to disappear any day soon, and so forth. It's not going to disappear any day soon. And the Chinese yuan would be a potential challenger, for example, but it's very weak because China has capital controls. There's no way a currency can really challenge the U.S. dollar if the currency has capital controls.
So I saw your comment and it said that India is not interested in challenging or undermining the dollar. Do you think Chinese are interested in undermining the dollar? Russians might be interested. Putin might be interested.
No, so is China.
So is China.
China, I wouldn't say undermining. The better word is replacing. But the Chinese yuan has made, a lot of headlines in the paper. There's some bilateral trade agreement China has with Brazil or somebody like that, and they're using the Chinese yuan as a currency for settlement. But that's peanuts. There's small footnotes in the picture. It's the dollar that dominates everything.
So moving forward, do you think, I mean, from an economic point of view, macroeconomic point of view, Chinese economy is stalling, is slowing down, or China is just going ahead?
Yeah, so China's definitely slowing down. And they had one big crisis, the real estate crisis, that everybody knows that bubble popped, and now they're in a deflation. The inflation rate in China is essentially zero. And why is that? That is because the money supply is growing at a slower rate than Hanke's golden growth rate of about 10% per year. It's a little over 8%. It's been growing very slowly. Well, why does it grow slowly? It grows slowly because most of the money produced every place is produced by commercial banks. And those commercial banks aren't making very many loans in China. And the reason for that is that the demand for loans is weak because enterprises, after the real estate bubble, are pulling back. They're trying to deleverage and reduce the amount of debt that they have. They got overextended with too much debt. Now China is witnessing what we call a balance sheet recession. All the enterprises are trying to shrink the debt and leverage that they have on their balance sheets. And when they do that, they have weak demand for credit. And if there's weak demand for credit, that means the banks aren't supplying so much of it. And that means that the money supply is not growing very fast. And the money supply is really the fuel for the economy every place.
All of this is internal to Chinese economy. Do you think Trump's policies of confronting China, are they going to affect China? I mean, will Trump succeed in restraining China?
I don't think, no, I don't think that, Trump has backed off of his commercial war with China was started a little bit in the first Trump administration. Then Biden accelerated it. Biden got much more aggressive than Trump, and now Trump he started as very aggressive with the trade war in this second term, and now he's backing off. And the reason he's backing off is what I mentioned or alluded to earlier, and that is that China controls all these critical materials. As Deng Xiaoping once said, the Middle East has oil, we have rare earths.
Yeah, exactly.
China has rare earths. People don't realize how powerful this is. These critical materials that China has a big advantage on and control over, they could wreck the U.S. economy in 6 months, 9 months time.
Just because of the rare earth metals?
The rare earths, magnets, these are all used in all kinds of high tech. Use these products that are dependent on inputs of rare earths and other critical materials, not just the rare earths. There are other ones.
So, but did you hear about this, that the Pakistani military offering Trump, and Trump is very eager to find rare earth metals in Pakistan?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a joke, but
seriously.
Yeah, they've talked about, they're doing a lot of talk about this in Ukraine too. But if those rare earths, number one, if they exist, they haven't been developed. So it isn't like you can turn a switch on and bang, all of a sudden you have rare earths coming out of Pakistan. You have to develop, first you have to find them, then you have to develop the mines, and even if you did that, where do you get them processed? There's only one place you can get them processed, and that's China.
Why? Why can't United States and India, for instance, or United States and Japan create a processing facility?
Well, because they don't have the know-how. China, I said the 3 M's: mining, metallurgy, and material science. If you look at Chinese universities, they rank very highly in the 3 M's. In other fields, they're very low. They have no ranking.
Are you suggesting that United States simply doesn't have the technical know-how of processing and developing the?
Yeah, that's correct.
So were the Americans sleeping for the past 20 years?
Yes. The Bureau of Mines disappeared. It doesn't exist anymore. So there is a problem with knowledge, and the knowledge is primarily in China.
Very interesting. Let me tell you something very interesting. I raised a discussion with 2 neuropsychiatrists, American neuropsychiatrists, asking them, can China be as creative and innovative as United States is? They thought, and they said that for creativity, you have to have freedom of thought. And since Chinese do not have, it's an authoritarian system, they don't have the freedom of thought. So China, in the end, when push comes to shove, cannot be as creative as United States is. But China is making creation everywhere. I mean, how do we reconcile this contradiction?
Well, look at the percentage of the young people in China who receive engineering degrees versus the United States. They produce a lot of people who can do things, and engineers can do things. So and these stories and narratives aren't ever quite so simple as we put them. You can look at China and you say, well, how can they do this? Or an authoritarian system? Well, the authoritarian system, actually, there are lots of pockets where there is quite a bit of freedom. Remember Deng Xiaoping. Now, I agree. Chairman Xi has turned back the clock on Deng Xiaoping, but Deng Xiaoping opened China up, and it's a huge place with a lot of smart people that after it opened up, instead of having bad ideas in their head, they had good ideas. And they're individually, Chinese are very competitive.
So just winding up a few things. So coming back to the India, I mean, which is of great interest. Do you think there will be a truce in the next coming days to weeks between Trump and Modi, or both sides will keep on standing where they are?
I think you said the next few days, so let's limit it to the next few days. The answer to that is no truce.
Next few weeks?
No truce.
Next few months?
We'll see how it plays out.
You yourself...
It depends a little bit. By the way, let's put the thing into context. So Trump wages war on Modi, and basically, kind of, as I've said before, he shakes his hand in the United States and then stabs him in the back with these tariffs. So it depends not only on what Trump does, but it takes two to tango. It depends on what Modi does. Now, where's Modi going to be this weekend? He's going to be in Beijing. He's going to be in Beijing. And who else is going to be in Beijing?
Putin.
Wait, Putin's going to be in Beijing. Also, by the way, interestingly, the leader of North Korea is going to be in Beijing. So it depends on if those all those countries. Let's just keep it to the big three: Russia, China, and India. They're all being attacked by the United States. That's unambiguous. So the question is, how do they defend themselves, and do they form some kind of counterattack? So it's a game theoretic problem, and it's a little bit above our pay grade on a short podcast to be coming to definite conclusions about
no. But let me understand. Give us a few more minutes. Trump team people, from the statements, look at Peter Navarro, whom you know fully well, the economist. They think that India has not been honest, has been playing double games. There has been no quid pro quo. United States gave India legitimacy into the global order, H-1B visas, excess, everything, Hollywood. But India hasn't really done anything in return. So if I ask you the provocative question, everyone says India, United States, multi-dimensional relationship. What is India giving United States in return?
Well, I think if you listen to Navarro, they're giving the United States a big headache. and there's a history to this. For example, the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, among other things, was the ambassador to India. And if you read Moynihan's letters and autobiographical material, he's scathing about dealing with the Indians. He couldn't stand to even be in the same room with Madame Gandhi.
But that's pretty old.
And why? Because it's this Brahman overview. It's the dynamics of being in the room. And what are the dynamics? Well, the Brahmins are above the U.S. ambassador. Do you have the picture?
I have, because I read Kissinger's
The
memo.
U.S. ambassador, a brilliant man, by the way, and a friend, someone I've had lunch in the Senate dining room with before, over a half a bottle of wine. He's a good Irishman, of course. Moynihan really had problems dealing with that, with that kind of, we are superior. You're just a peon from the United States.
Yes.
He not only was a peon from the United States, he'd been he became a U.S. senator. He was a professor at Harvard. He was a heavyweight.
So
there's no question about that.
I found similar impressions in Henry Kissinger's memoirs of his and Nixon's recollection about interacting with Indira Gandhi. And I see there's sort of a superiority complex in many Indians. But Moody is not part of that. He's a very humble.
No, he isn't. He isn't. But yeah, there's no question about that. That to be clear, you're exactly correct. However, what the expression we were talking about, Navarro is basically kind of an outlier, and even in the Trump administration, in a way. So,
but Trump has
these were words coming from his mouth. So you have some idea that there's some of that, those atmospherics still in the picture, even with the people surrounding Modi.
Yes.
So if you walk into a room and all of a sudden you're dealing with a lot of people and they make you feel like you're inferior, that doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth. And I think there's probably some of this involved. And I think what Navarro is saying, there probably is an element of that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said it.
So, but Navarro's argument, if you deconstruct the argument, is also like, for instance, look at Pakistan, that has been fighting wars for India, for United States, in Afghanistan, in Sito, Santo. India has never been ready to fight for United States. I mean, India is not ready to fight China. India is not ready to distance from Russia. So what is India going to do for United States?
Well, what they're asking the Indians to do is to decouple from Russia. But that's hard to do because in India, as you know, has had a long relationship with the so again, all these things have to be put into context. You got to set the table before you start talking. Before dinner, you have to set the table properly. And so India, what are we talking about? We're talking about decoupling from Russia. This is not going to happen. Among other things, just from a military point of view, a lot of the military equipment in India comes from where? Russia. So how do they get ammunition and spare parts and so forth? They get them from Russia. So the United States is asking them to basically cut all that off.
But India has another characteristic, historical. It's not going to go radical in any direction. So Narendra Modi is not attending the military parade, but Pakistani Prime Minister is attending the military parade after the SCO summit, right? So whereas China and Russia may like to undermine the dollar or replace the dollar, but India is not going to come up fighting against the US dollar. So India is very balanced in that respect. So do you expect that Trump's shenanigans are going to push India more firmly with China and Russia? I mean, historically, India hasn't done any such thing.
I think India's position will not fundamentally change from where it's been. It's like a big ship. It's a little bit hard to turn a big ship around in a hurry, and I don't think that the ship will turn around very rapidly. But I do think interestingly enough, that the big three, who by the way have the three best foreign ministers I think on the planet: Russia, China, and India. So they not only have strong leaders, but they also have the best foreign ministers by far. And it happens. Where did the foreign minister of India cut his teeth when he was a young diplomat? In Moscow.
Agreed.
So this grouping of those three will I think will become tighter in response to the fact that these tariffs are a weapon of war, by the way, and certainly secondary sanctions are definitely a weapon of war, a commercial weapon of war.
But Professor Hanke, do you think Donald Trump and his team are so naive that they're pushing India, Russia, and China into one corner? Don't they see the implications which I and you can see?
Apparently not. I mean, I would. That's the one great thing about free trade. If you allow everybody to be free to make voluntary exchanges with each other, and you don't get in the way, I think everybody's a lot happier.
Okay, I think it's just last question. I think you have other things to do. So coming to the domestic thing, in this week, Trump has been on a firing spree. I mean, he's meddling with the Fed Reserve, which has never happened. He fired one of his own nominee in the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta on vaccination issue or something. All this, and then calling National Guards in DC, thinking of sending them to Chicago. I mean, all this tinkering with the institutional landscape in the United States. What will be the implications of that?
Well, we don't exactly know. This gets back to your prior question, and that is, you never know what the unintended consequences of an act are going to be. You can predict that there will be unintended consequences. On sanctions, for example, I know, because there's a huge scholarly literature on sanctions, that sanctions never work, by the way. They always backfire. And they backfire and create lots of unintended consequences. That's why they backfire. And they don't achieve their objective, because once you go after something or somebody or a regime with sanctions, there's a rally around the flag effect. So Modi has become more popular because of Trump's war. You see, Xi becomes more popular. Putin is actually more popular, by the way. The most sanctioned country in the world is Russia by far, and
Iran.
Oh, it's Russia. Many more sanctions than Iran. Many more. Iran isn't even close. There's no one close to Russia in terms of the sanctions that have been imposed on them at present. But they never work. That's the history of them. I should say they rarely work. There are very few cases where they've been effective. Why do you think we have communist Cuba right next door to us, next door to Florida? It's been a long time. Cuba's been sanctioned ever since Castro's revolution. Sanction, sanction, sanction. And there's a huge rally around the flag effect, and Cuba is still communist. Why do you think Maduro in Venezuela, he's ruined the economy, created 2 hyperinflations in 11 years, and he's still in power? Because of the rally around the flag. He has a base, and it rallies around him because of the sanctions that the U.S. and others have put on Venezuela. So they're counterproductive. They're basically for losers, sanctions. And tariffs, we know the same way. You can hardly find an economist who would advocate tariffs any place in the world, whether they're right, left, center, doesn't make any difference. And why do they say that? Because they know there are gains from trade, and the tariffs or quotas or non-tariff barriers, they take those gains from trade away.
Hmm.
They pull them out of the system. They're bad for the economies.
Hmm. So if I ask you to sum it up by giving one message to all those people who feel they're at the receiving end of the American empire, whether they're in India or in China or in Pakistan, what would be your message to them?
My message is a message from Napoleon. Never interfere with an enemy in the process of destroying himself.
Thank you, Professor Steve Hanke. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Moeed. It's been great to be with you. Enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much.